Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone that is listening and tuning in right now, or indeed welcoming me into their ears at a more suitable time for you and listening back on the podcast. This is Branding for Breweries. It is the show that provides as much value from people within the industry to help your brewery to thrive, survive, and hopefully grow as well. And today is no exception. I am joined by James Mataczynski, who is a number of things. He is an engineer, award-winning brewer, brewery owner, and founder and CEO of CraftCrate. And that's what we're chatting to James about today, packaging. It's not just about the lovely beer, of course, that's wonderful, but how can you leverage that packaging to actually boost your brand and boost your revenue? So, without further ado, welcome to the stage, Mr. James.
Good morning.
James.
Good morning, Tim. How are you?
I am super funky fresh, my man. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's an honor to talk to you, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I remember when we first started talking on LinkedIn, it was like, oh, this guy's cool. I want to talk to him.
Yeah, you know, I do what I can on LinkedIn to appear cool and mysterious. No, not mysterious. If anything, I say far too much on LinkedIn. But James, this show isn't about me. It's about you and your knowledge, dude. So let's get stuck in. But before we talk about what we've come here today to talk about, packaging, can you give us a bit of a rundown as to how you got to where you are and why people should actually give us a bit of time to listen to what you have to say, please?
Sure. So my wife and I moved to Colorado here in 2018, and I actually have a degree in mechanical engineering from University of Wisconsin-Platteville. So those from Wisconsin know it's basically the School of Mines for Wisconsin, one of the mining states here in the States. And from there, I was like, let's get into the engineering world. Let's go build an Ironman suit. So I actually joined a biomedical engineering company and absolutely hated it. It was terrible. It was one of those things where I was on Microsoft Word 95% of my job, not creating anything, not, it was all justification of something I already knew existed. And just a quick story. I remember I was doing a statistical analysis on an equation, and gravity was in there, and my boss basically threw the report back at me and was just like, "You forgot to do the statistical analysis on gravity." It's like gravity is a constant, and in that moment, I knew this isn't for me. What else is there? And so my landlord at the time was actually the director of brewing operations at Tivoli, which is actually the second oldest location here in the United States for beer. It's not operating right now, but at the time, he's like, "Hey, you're an engineer. You get this heat transfer fluid dynamics stuff." I'm like, "Absolutely, sign me up." So he's like, "Great, you're going to start on the packaging line." And my first job ever in the industry was taking cans by hand off of the pallet and putting it onto the line, off the pallet, putting it onto the line for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And that's how a lot of brewers start. That's how a lot of people start. And that was 2019. Eventually worked my way up to actually running the machine, and then getting myself up onto the brew deck and into the cellar, and like really started to kind of merge the science and the art that is brewing. From there, I went to my former brewery, which is called Arms Brewing down in Denver. Just a quick shout out to them, where I was brewing for them, and they were only doing taproom sales across the bar, and that was like right as the pandemic hit. And I just remember it hurt my soul that we couldn't sell enough beer, and we actually had to start dumping beer because it was just getting old in the bright tanks. Oh, so I was trying to convince my boss, like, dude, we've got to package this, we got to sell it, we got to distribute it. And we had a quite unique opportunity here in Colorado, specifically Denver, where there was mobile packaging lines. And so these guys would basically load up the canning unit up onto basically a box truck, drive it to the brewery, set it up, package for the day, and leave. And it was great. We were able to sell our product instead of dumping it down the drain. But my boss, who was the numbers guy, was just like, dude, just like 3 to 5% margin on it, and like we're losing money. Like this sucks. And so that's when my wheels started to turn. Like, how can we do this better? How can we do this better? How can we do this better? Eventually, I started up their packaging line, a Wild Goose packaging line, and got it running. And we got our quality really, really high. And there was still a part of me that was like, man, I wish I could send some of this really good beer home back to my friends, because my friends are IPA haters. I don't know. They're loggerheads. And I'm just like, but this hazy is delicious. Like, how can you not taste the pineapple in this hazy? There's no pineapple in it. And so that's kind of what led me down the rabbit hole of packaging and redefining the packaging with CraftCrate, my startup, and then eventually buying this brewery as the business accelerator for that. So yeah.
Dude, I love that. And let's not glimpse over the fact that you originally just wanted to make an Iron Man suit, which would have been a
Yeah.
completely different conversation to what we're having now. It's like, why are you trying to me? Be out there saving the world, James. Damn it, man. But let's have a bit of a chat then about, the packaging side of things. What have you discovered, from the research that you've done and the journey that you've taken? How is that influencing like the consumer behavior, like availability, getting their hands on it, what they're thinking of it?
Yeah. So I thought, and my boss thought at the same time, it was going to be the silver bullet of, packaging is marketing. And like, if we get everything out there, people are just going to flock to the breweries, because we can finally figure out, hey, this is where we're at. And it actually wasn't as much of that as what we thought. It was a very, very interesting dichotomy where we're selling beer and we're selling good beer, and there's pull through at these liquor stores, but we're not actually seeing any of that traffic come back to the brewery. And we even noticed that when we were distributing like half barrels to different restaurants and things like that, people would ask, "Oh, what beer is that?" Nobody would drink that beer and then come to the brewery. So we actually went through a couple of rebrands to try to get this to work. And so we tried to put, I don't know if you guys do the wooden nickels at all over there across the pond, but yeah, so basically it's just wooden nickels that fit perfectly on top of cans when you put them in the packaging. And then when people open the packaging, it's a little surprise, and they're like, "Oh, redeem, one free pint if you bring this back." Nice. We put I think it was like 250 of these wooden nickels out over the course of 3 months, and we saw 3 of them back over the year.
Whoa.
Yeah, so we're like, what is going on? So we kind of changed our train of thought from a marketing branding play to get people to the brewery, because obviously you're 90+% margin across the bar versus maybe 30% if you're lucky gross margin distributing your beer in specifically cans. And so we just never saw that pull through come back. And so we switched our gears and we're like, okay, this has to be a revenue stream on its own. It has to stand up on its own. We can't take a loss when we package our beer. And so that's kind of how we started to look at how do we brand our beer, and how do we sell more at the liquor store.
So talk to me more about how you turn it into that revenue stream, right? Because I would imagine there are going to be a lot of brewery owners and people within the brewery who are stuck in the same position that you were in, where you're like, oh yeah, we just need to pull them to the tap room, and it's not happening. So is this a failed exercise? What's the goal? What is how you make it work for your brewery?
So what we ultimately did, and the ultimate goal was to just run it almost as its own business, right? Where we would take a look and we would just really, really nail down the cost of goods sold, right? So, we're X amount of dollars for the liquid, we're X amount of dollars for the aluminum, we're X amount of dollars for the sticker, the runtime. Like, we got really, really granular with it. So when we actually did sell our beer to the distributor, so in America we have a 3-tier system. So when we would sell our beer to the distributor, we would actually see a profit off of selling it, which versus a lot of other breweries, they try to go cheap, and they go the other side. They're like, oh, we're going to go way expensive and then hit the loss on the marketing standpoint. There's just no ROI there. So we're like, this has to be its own separate business to then grow the overall business of the brewery. And essentially that's what we did.
So is it as simple as that idea of just going like, we need to know the exact cost per unit, and as long as we're making X percentage on top of that, it's a worthwhile investment, really?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And what was really fun is there were some beers that were, like the fruited sour IPA. Like there's some crazy beers we came up with that just didn't make sense to actually package into cans, right? And what was also really fun is we would use the tap room to then say what beer should we distribute as our seasonality. So, for example, we would use we sold. Oh God, we actually ran out of our Oktoberfest. We called it Seshtoberfest, so it was like half ABV. Great branding on that one. And we pulled through it on the tap room like that. Like, I mean, we made 20 barrels of it and it was gone in like 2 weeks. It was great across the tap room. So we're like, oh, okay, next year we need to put, we need to make 40 barrels, put half of it in the cans, and it made sense, and it all pulled through within that month. So to use a tap room is almost like your test market for what you're going to see out on the liquor store markets. For us, that's been working. That was really great.
Okay. Is there ever the situation where you've gone like, okay, it was really successful in the tap room, but financially it's not suitable for like packing it up and sending out? Does that
Oh yeah,
happen?
it does happen. Yeah. Specifically when you get into beer nerd, I call them like beer nerd styles, where it's like the specialty saisons and the really highly fruited sours, or like the really sour sours, or like the barrel aged stuff. A lot of that stuff pulls through really. We actually did a beer wine hybrid, which was really fun. Yeah, so we took beer, we put it into wine barrels, and it had like a wine. We call it a can of wine from Sunny, Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference. And we actually saw really great pull through on the tap room, and it just didn't make sense to put in the cans whatsoever. Um,
But I suppose in that situation, then you've got your own marketing opportunity there, right? Like only available in the tap
yep,
room, not available anywhere else. So you can spin it to be still a positive from the eyes of your drinker, right?
exactly. So kind of evolving in that evolution is that kind of I love the rabbit hole you sent me down here. That's how my brain works. What we saw was we're like, oh, okay, if people aren't going to come to the tap room, how can we capture that attention, right? Like Gary Vee always says, like attention is the number one asset. And so how do we capture that attention? So what we ended up doing was we started, and actually I started the social media account at Call to Arms, and it actually started to grow so much that I actually had to sell it to my bosses. Funny story. Yay, entrepreneurship. And what we did was we took that social media account, we took our packaging, and we're like, hey, if you're not going to come to the tap room, go look at our socials, right? And if you look at their social media accounts, TikTok, Instagram, all of that, it's actually one of the bigger accounts here in the Denver area. And so we use that platform then to reach out to different influencers. And the big influencer that we got was Susie Vidal. I always forget how you say her name, but OnlyPans girl. If you're familiar with OnlyPans on TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So we reached out to her, and she's like, "Oh, you've got a pretty decent social media following. Your beer is delicious. Let's do a collaboration." So she actually came to the brewery. I brewed with her. So if you go to her account, you can probably find me, my ugly mug on there somewhere, when I didn't have this glorious of a beard. And she came to the brewery, blew it up on her account, blew it up on our account. And it was actually when we sold her beer, we did a launch party for her. We sold her beer. It was the number one day in taproom sales ever. I still think to this day. Um, yeah, it was crazy, and it was just simple as we brewed this influencer beer. We did a launch party, and people all over the country were flying in to just do a meet and greet. Like it wasn't anything crazy, and it blew everything out of the water. So that's kind of like the evolution of kind of where we went.
And I've spoken to other people about the power of collaborations within the beer industry because you're just drawing more beer nerds and geeks to your brand because they're already following that person. So it's a natural kind of like flow down where it's like they like that person works with your beer, they now like your beer, or at least want to try your beer. So it makes perfect sense. So if if a brewery's gone, okay, financially, I've run the maths. I know the unit price. I know I can get a markup on this. That's great. It sold really well in the tap room. So we tick that box. You talk about the idea of reaching out on social media and driving more interest towards the can there. What other things were you doing or do you do when it comes to like pushing your packaging out there to drive more demand?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that specifically you need to include on your can. I actually wrote them down, so you'll probably see me looking down. But uh, and some of it comes from research. So like, I mean, if you look at the research, most people, and this was all Americans. I looked at the MBAA, so it's mostly American data, but I'm sure it translates somewhat.
Mhm.
But 66% of Americans buy beer based on the label, just the label itself, right? And about 71% of those want like bold, in your face. You can, stand back from the cooler, scan it, and be like, "What's that?" kind of thing. That's what people are looking for. And then when they get up to the can, there's a few things they're looking for as well. Specifically here in Colorado and a bunch of other green states, they're looking for, is this beer sustainable? Is the packaging sustainable? I actually brew my IPA with sustainable proximity malt, so it's like very eco-friendly. The hops I grab are very, very eco-friendly. The new Aurora hop from Hopsteiner. It's a beautiful hop. It's very, very CO2 friendly. But they're going to look at the sustainability of both the beer and the packaging. So when it comes to sustainability in the packaging, in talking with some of the recyclers here in Colorado, they'll actually take, if an aluminum can has a sticker on it, they'll actually just throw it in the dump because of so the impurities of the sticker in the aluminum makes the aluminum not recyclable anymore. So a lot of people don't know that. So if you have a sticker label, peel the sticker off, then they can actually recycle it, because aluminum is 100% recyclable every single time, except when it has a sticker on it. So they look a lot of, especially here in Colorado, the Colorado Brewers Guild, construction behind me.
Good.
Colorado Brewers Guild is really starting to push to consumers that, hey, take these labels off before you recycle them. So they look at the sustainability.
Give them a shout. Be like, dude, shush, I'm on a go live. The joys of go live, everyone. It's brilliant.
I know. We're getting new fermenters today, so he's prepping for everything. Of course, he has one more minute past my dad. So the other thing that kind of both anecdotal and research is we can look at packaging trends too. So like, I know Heineken has their party keg, right, where you tap it and it's garbage by the end of the night. A lot of breweries push that in the packaging trends. What people look for also is the size and the format, right? So it's a 4-pack versus a 6-pack, 16s versus 12s. People are considering that depending on what they're going to do. I've noticed this specifically more in the younger generations, which I think is a big sticking point for a lot of just alcohol in general producers, is what do we do about Generation Z, the Zoomers? How do we get them into drinking our product? And what we've noticed here at the brewery is it's usually a drink and an activity, right? So people want a 4-pack of beer and go play disc golf, right? Or a 6-pack of beer, they're going camping for the weekend, kind of thing. So that's kind of the trend that we're seeing in the size and the format realm. And then basically the last thing that I had in my notes was like, what information's on the can? The beer style, a lot. I like what hops are used, and then the flavor profile. I think it drives me nuts in any alcohol space when you don't get flavor notes. It's like, cool, I'm drinking a Pilsner, but what specific, is it floral? Is it more bitter? That sort of stuff. So those are kind of just like, if you want to fall down any of those rabbit holes, those are kind of the big drivers on what people are going to look for when they actually buy the beer.
I want to double down on the size and format piece really quickly, because I noticed something really interesting just a couple of weeks ago around St. Patrick's Day, and there was footage of like younger Gen Zers out in parties, but they had like one of these big kind of like milk crate size things with a lid, and that was their thing. And I was trying to read into it, and they're like, yeah, this is kind of an evolution. And right, don't get me wrong, I'm not sat here going breweries need to be sticking all their beer inside a milk crate, but the mindset there is they want their drink, it's going to last them for the event, it's got a lid on it so it's safe, and they can own it and like kind of take it wherever you want. And you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's a safety side of things, there's a value side of things, and it's ownership, and there's a bit of personality to it, because they were just like marking up these kind of crates or whatever you want to call them. Have you seen that as well?
I haven't seen the reclosable lid. What my mind went to NOS, the energy drink, how they sometimes they have the closable lid on the aluminum cans. I think it's probably something similar to that.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah.
But then it's like like you say, the practicalities of the packaging and the amounts. So You guys have got crowlers, so you're already one step ahead where you got big cans and we've just got these weeny kind of 330s or 440 mils. We've just had a couple of breweries who are embracing the pint size can. And I've been getting some really interesting reactions on social media because I'm asking, like, do you prefer the bigger can or do you prefer the smaller can?
Yeah.
And a lot of time for my audience, it's about the volume. Like, is it a higher percentage? Give it to me in a smaller can because I don't want to be sleeping in a gutter after I've drunk a pint of it. But I like your approach of, like, actually, if you're making a beer which is targeted at, like, it's a great one to go out cycling or you're hiking or it's for an event, the packaging can really lean into that, can't it?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think it's really cool if, packaging aluminum, like you see all this. So the one example I thought of, they actually, it looks like a holster where you have like grenades kind of thing, but you
Hmm.
shove cans in that, like the can holster, and then you go skiing, right? Colorado, go skiing, go snowboarding. That sort of, you're gonna have a beer on the chairlift on the way up, kind of thing, and you're gonna finish it, throw it away, and by the time you come down, yeah. So that's super interesting kind of observation that you notice between the size and the form factor and the beer. I think 100% plays into specifically the younger audience. It makes total sense.
And what about, like, more of the custom packaging side of things? You talk about, like, the holster, right? There was going to be someone who invested the time and the money to go, this is going to be a good thing, and I hope it pays off. And I should imagine a brewery who's got their head screwed on, they could identify a situation where a certain type of packaging would work wonders for them. But what's the trade-off? What's the balance, right? Because there's got to be lots of money that goes into developing new packaging.
Yeah, a ton of money. I'm obviously going through that right now with CraftCrate startup and how much money it is going into that packaging. As far as like the gimmicks or the beer holster, the other one that I just thought of is like the bottle holder that you put on the underside of your bicycle, when you put bottles in that, that sort of stuff. It's kind of, that game is more of like a merchandise play, is like how much merch do we actually get? Like how much can we pull through? I just actually, speaking of another form factor, I just have another one that popped in my head is the Choosy. So I don't know if you've seen the Choosy for a friend of mine. It basically a can of chew or like your Zin or anything like that, it screws on the bottom, and then it's a holder. You put your can of beer in there. So it's a koozie that you can also, but anyway, I digress. So where my head went to, but yeah, like these different form factors. I think the biggest challenge for the breweries is how much do you order and how much is it a fad? Because you've seen a lot of different form factors of different beer distribution methods, and really the only one that has stuck is the can, right? Is
Mm.
the can and the bottle. And so nobody's got a crystal ball, but for breweries have to be aware that if they go down the rabbit hole of that branding, it's got to be the brand, it's got to be the marketing, and know that it's going to be a limited run. You're not going to keep selling a ton of these. It's going to be a one and done on whatever form factor you choose to iterate on.
And what about, like, almost like anchoring it to an event? So I'm just thinking about, you talked about the holder that attached to the bike, right?
Yeah,
So if a brewery were of a suitable size where they could sponsor a race or a cross country kind of thing, and actually their contribution not only financially was, but everyone got the can holder that affixed to their bike. To me, that, I think that's a winner, because the majority of people are going to be sticking that on their bike, and all of a sudden they've got all of these bikes going around with just a little bit of their branding on. Would
yeah.
that be a suitable investment?
Uh, it's hard to measure the ROI. I would say yes. Generally, I would say yes, just because I know that you're never going to measure the ROI on something like that. Like
Mm.
I had to take my engineering hat off and put my branding hat on. It's just like, the engineering hat says, how do you measure every time somebody sees your brand, right? For bigger breweries, it makes perfect sense. Like if you're talking like Odell's or New Belgium, just here in Colorado, things like that makes perfect sense. Smaller breweries, I mean, if you've got cash to burn, fine. If it's something that you're passionate about, I think that's the other thing is like, you have the brewery brand, which is typically revolves around the owner's interest. And so if the owner is into cycling and it benefits them in the future, I say 100% go for it.
Mm.
Or like concerts, if you have koozies, sometimes people collect. My roommate used to collect koozies, and so you just, if as long as your brand is on the koozie and it was really well done, and it's great. Stickers obviously have always been a thing. Just giving free stickers out with both pints of beer, and they actually make labels with stickers that you can peel off, which I think is really cool. So like even when you sell somebody a can, they can pull the sticker off, slap it on their fridge, and now it's it's in perpetuity in their face all the time. So how can you take packaging and go into perpetuity? Is a win. So if you can kind of spin it in that sense, it's worth the money. Yes, worth the money.
And to think about, we talked about it earlier, it's like it's not just about the packaging, but it's then the promotion of the packaging as well, and drawing everyone and raising awareness of it. So come full circle. Let's talk about the eco side of things, right? Because you drop the bomb where you're like, yep, some cans, the cans are recyclable, but as soon as the label or the sticker's stuck on it, it's got to go into landfill, which is a shocker. But there's a cost trade-off as well, right? Like if you're investing in the right type of label that doesn't have to be removed and all that kind of stuff. So where are the cost-effective ways of being green with your packaging?
Yeah, so it's hard in general, it's hard for craft breweries to be green with their packaging, just because sticker labels and cans. It's the cheapest way to go, because you can do small volume runs. You can buy just the blank aluminum and then just put whatever brand you want on them. The most eco-friendly way to go as far as cans go is exactly what the big beer companies do. They just print it right on the can. And you're starting to see more and more smaller companies pop up that say, hey, we can print this can for you. Problem is that if you don't use them all, then obviously then it's just going to the recycling, or you're just bought, somebody else's recycling. So that is like the most eco-friendly way to go, is to printed cans and cardboard holding. There are things, I grabbed this from so there are like the PackTechs, there are recyclable PackTechs out there. So you can start looking at things like recyclable PackTechs. Another way to offset some of the sticker costs is obviously how green is the beer. How renewable is the beer? Like I talked about my IPA being really renewable. Like the hop I use is like 60% less CO2 emissions. You talk about the grain is, again, I think it's like 40 or 50% less CO2 emissions, less pesticides, things like that. So if the beer is, or sorry, if the packaging is going to be less eco-friendly, then the beer has to be more eco-friendly, and kind of like there's that cost, there's that trade-off. And most of that data has to come from your distributors, but your suppliers. But that's kind of the way to go, and that's kind of where CraftCrate. I don't want to pitch CraftCrate too much here, but that's where CraftCrate is going. Is that it's going to the cardboard bag and box, cardboard, aluminum bag, recyclable tap handle. So that's kind of part of the iteration on the startup, and that's where they're going with that. Yeah.
And talking about that iteration, like the States always tend to be a little bit ahead of where we are in the UK. So I want to talk about innovations in terms of packaging and just cool stuff that you've seen out there, or even in your own wannabe Iron Man mind, where you're like, this would be wicked if somebody did this.
Yeah. So in my Iron Man mind, that's where I came up with my startup, the bag and box. So just keeping it real high level. Bag and box beer that you just throw in your fridge, carbonated, start to finish. Just draft quality beer at home. So that's kind of like the iteration I'm working on. It's very, very early stage. We just got issued our patent like 3 weeks ago now. So it is patented technology that we're going through. Another failed startup that I saw, which I thought was actually really cool, was actually beer, going the same beer in bag concept. So beer in bag, and then basically you buy the bags from breweries and you put it into this machine that both keeps it carbonated and dispenses. They had a lot of problems, so it actually went under in 2016. But I thought it was a really, really cool concept. Most of these iterations and these cool concepts, are kind of a fad. Like with the Heineken party kegs, where you have the party keg, you crack it, and it's garbage within 24 hours. It's great for a while, and then it's just garbage within 24 hours. I've seen a lot of those. That's starting to dwindle down also, just because aluminum again is getting expensive. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Actually, Guinness does a really good job with their nitrogenated balls. Those balls, when you crack it, then it releases the nitrogen. I thought that's really cool. Some of the keeping that around. I thought that was going to go away, but keeping that around has been really cool. But yeah, as far as I'm trying to think of other really cool. Those were the ones that popped in my head, and I took notes on. I'm trying to think if there's anything else out there. Sounds like you guys have the resealable cap. That's actually kind of cool. But I can
Yeah,
see
well,
that.
it's just something I saw online. I can't claim that I know someone's got it here in the UK. Hopefully someone's going to listen to this and be like, I'm going
Yeah,
to look into it.
yeah,
But here in the UK, we've got a lot of cask beer. So the whole bag in a box thing we've had that for quite some time because you
yeah.
don't have the carbonation situation. But
Right.
yeah, to embrace how do you get your keg stuff and get the same experience, I can see that being really valuable, especially, and
Yeah.
I don't like talking politics on this show, but obviously with the price of materials and things that go up, like
Yep.
how can you be more eco and cost conscious with all of that?
Right. I
But
think the biggest challenge with any sort of niche beer packaging is oxygen ingress. So oxygen is like a destroyer of really good beer. Like, not to get in the weeds too much, as we talked about that, but not to get in the weeds too much. But as soon as you pop a can or you pop a crowler, or even if it's a resealable cap, as soon as oxygen touches that beer, I mean, it's got 24 hours to live. I mean, that's it. And then you start tasting the off flavors of oxidized beer, cardboard, gym sock, paper, depending on how you perceive it. And so, you walk into you walk into a fraternity house or a house party after the night of the party, you have that old beer smell. That's essentially what you're doing to that beer if you don't finish it in that session, right? So that's why actually our brewery went away from the crowler system, the crowlers and growlers. Like I charge probably double what I should for a growler just because I don't want to fill it. Because it's just a bad representation of our beer. By the time you get it home and you drink it 2 days, it just doesn't taste like it would here at the tap room. So any sort of these gimmicky packaging, it all revolves around how can you keep oxygen out from non-cask barrel aged stuff.
But I'm thinking about the classics actually, and there are still innovative ways to use them from a kind of an engagement or a branding point. So you just showed the 4 plastic top kind of thing. What do you call them? Aren't they?
These are called pack techs. So, or I call it pack techs, but yeah, essentially you can kind of see, and I'm trying to get the light here. You actually just put the 16 or 12 ounce because it's the same diameter, and then there's a little like handle here that just with a little thumb tab. You just grab it, boom, and you're off to the beach or off hiking or whatever.
So those I saw someone on social the other day, and they were running like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket competition, and so they would just hide a little one underneath like 1 in every 100. So that's a conversational piece. Or when people print the date on the bottom of when it was canned, like you can modify what it says, so you can put a little message and something in there. Like those are really.
Yeah, we've done that. When we had a mobile canning line, they had that operation, or they had that on there. And our hazy at the time, just quick story, our hazy at the time was Janet Reno's Dance Party. That's what we called it. And it was an SNL skit that they did. And Rudy Giuliani was on there, where Will Ferrell, who's playing Janet Reno, gets into a boxing match with Rudy Giuliani and punches him. And so on the bottom of the can, it was the date, and then it said, who wouldn't want to punch Giuliani? So like those little Easter eggs in there, when you turn around, people get a chuckle out of it, and you move on with life. So yeah, so any sort of Easter eggs, and just just going down, how do you get the cans from liquor store out? So we actually iterated from these pack techs. Then we actually started boxing our beer and putting it into the thin grade cardboard, right? And so when you put cans in the cardboard, now all of a sudden the cardboard turns into basically a giant billboard for you. And so we actually put our map of our brewery onto the cardboard. And we saw a little bit of an uptick, but there's more stuff that you can do with a flat surface versus a round surface, which I'm sure you're aware of.
And I love the idea of, like you say, the Easter egg side of things, because from a marketing standpoint, what you're actually doing is you're giving your drinkers a reason to talk more about your brand on your behalf. And it's more likely if they post a picture of like, found this on the can, or didn't realize this was a thing, and they post that to their audience, or they're talking about it, people are far more likely to go, oh, that's interesting and I trust it, versus a brewery going, hey, look, we're really cool and quirky because we put a fun message underneath the can.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
great
Or even
if it's done
or
correctly.
even if you took like a label and you change just one aspect of it to match what that beer was doing. So like again, on my old, we haven't had a chance to really brand a lot here, so I keep talking about my old brewery. But the old brewery called Arns, they would have a little silhouette kind of down at the bottom that would like represent the style of beer, and it would change every single style. It was in the same place, it was the same size, but that silhouette would change, right? Or there was, you know, where under the government warning, you know, then you would have like a little saying that would be, you know, relatable to the beer. So like for example, our seltzer was called a lawsuit, which they actually had to trademark. And then, you know, on the side it said tiny bubbles tickle tongues. Everybody was just like, what is that from? And then you reference, you know, the LaCroix boy on YouTube, and everybody's like, oh, got it. And like you said, it starts that conversation, and you take your overall branding, and certain elements stay the same or in the same places, but you change how it relates to that specific style. And so like your logo stays the same, but you know, silhouette changes, or the font isn't, or the font's in the same place, but it changes colors and pops, and you know, there's all sorts of Easter eggs. And especially when your beer name is either trademarked or references something else, and you put those little Easter eggs in there, it really draws people in, and then they talk about it. Like you said, they talk about it and they're like, oh, this was actually good beer. And I think that's something that gets glossed over a lot in the packaging industry, is how good is the beer actually to your customer. So yeah, that's kind of whole different thing.
I agree, but it is like you say, it's that packaging, it's that can that the majority of the time they're like, okay, I'll give this a go.
Right.
I think you touched on something really interesting there, is with more of like a rotational range, something that isn't around for a long time, but just a good time, how people can lean into cultural relevances and things that are of the moment. So actually that paints a really great picture of the brewery. It's like, hey, they're with it, they get our sense of humor. And therefore you're building up this kind of brand affinity with your drinker, especially if they're of that ilk. Like there's a benefit to actually having this rolling range where you can change things up every now and again.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So you change it up. You keep certain elements the same, and you change it up to be cultural relevance. I know this cultural relevance, it slightly political, but it's a good example. So when President Trump, when Joe Biden beat Trump the last election cycle, we released a beer on Inauguration Day, and we called it "You're Fired." And it was Donald Trump looking in the mirror at himself saying, "You're fired." And it was a reference to his days when he was on The Apprentice, right? And so it was him firing himself. And we thought it was hilarious. Most of the people got the joke, but there was so much hate on social media. Our Google reviews went down, everything went down. It was actually, yeah, oh yeah, people were coming like out of the woodwork and like giving us 1-star reviews, and they've never been to Colorado. It was really funny. But what ended up happening was we sold 120 cases in 3 hours. And it was just like, okay, people got the joke. It was culturally relevant. It was on brand for that specific brewery with all the different elements that we were talking about. And that sort of fire is what sold the beer. And it was great. And we got beer drinkers out drinking the beer because it was culturally relevant.
Yeah, and I think a really important thing you mentioned, that it was on brand, it was right for the brewery. Like other breweries who don't do that kind of thing, if they all of a sudden came out with something which is a little bit controversial or a bit topical, you're like, that might not work so well. So it's important that a brewery knows who they are and kind of their stance and what they're all about before trying to be too relevant at times.
Exactly. Another brewery example is there's another brewery here in Colorado called Conrad Brewing. And their whole, it's camaraderie. They actually have that Russian heritage, and it was a very, very positive vibe brewery. But when the Ukraine war started, it was just they had to take a step back and go, oh crap, we have to change a couple of elements. And so they changed the elements. They still kept it on brand so people could recognize that it was Comrade Brewing, but it was Comrade Brewing in a positive light, and they basically cut ties as much as they could. So again, culturally relevant, but things you have to be aware of as a brewery, for sure.
100%. James, like 40 minutes has flown by. Like I can't believe it's gone so
really
quickly.
has.
But let's try and bring this to a wrap. So you're sat at a bar, you're having a conversation with a brewer, and they're like, James, I think it's time to rethink our packaging strategy. Like, what are you saying to them? Like, where do they need to start? What's the first steps they've got to do?
First steps is going to the big liquor stores and just take a bunch of giant steps back and say what packaging draws your attention and why. I think doing your homework in that respect. So we talked about bold packaging. We talked about different packaging that like has the different elements. Like what is your color scheme? Like it goes back to very, very simple, or not simple, but basics. Like going back to the basics, going back to marketing 101. What's your color? How do you want to present yourself? What are some of the, doing a vision board, that sort of stuff, and just figuring out what is you before you even start the process, right? Nail your liquid, obviously, but make sure you figure out who are you? Who is your brewery? What sort of brand, what sort of messaging do you want to put out there, and why? I think the big reason is why. There's a lot of breweries out there. You're just like, why are you like, that doesn't make sense with that over there, and so just having a consistent packaging, a consistent message, a consistent why are you brewing this beer? That's where you need to start.
Dude, that is music to my ears because it aligns with my brand strategy offering and approach that we do here at the Brand Weaver. And that was not set up, people. That is
No, it wasn't.
James, I appreciate and I thank you wholeheartedly for your time today, buddy. If people want to connect with you, want to poke your brains about how do you successfully potentially make an Iron Man suit, or indeed just see what you're getting up to, where can they get in touch, man?
They can always find me on LinkedIn. It's just James Mataczynski, just like you see it here. You can also follow me on Instagram. I think I set everything up. It's james.mataczynski. LinkedIn is probably best, or you can always email me too. It's james@craftcratellc.com. That's the name of the startup. If you want a direct email message, I'm small enough yet where I will email you back with all your questions, but that's the best way is LinkedIn and email.
Fantastic, James. Well, everyone else, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. This has been Branding for Breweries, and you all rock. Have a great day, people.